touched by the turnout here.
We love you.
So, thank you. I think we'll just go ahead and get started. I'm going to start off by welcoming you all and also thanking Maryland Hall for hosting this exhibition. I think, as you can tell by looking around, they've done a beautiful job of presenting it and hanging the work, and I really appreciate Sigrid's efforts, and it's just really a great opportunity for us to show together. This has been a long time dream of mine to do a show with my dad, and I don't know if he ever imagined when I was born that we'd be doing this, but this is really very exciting for me to be able to have my paintings after hopefully what is just halfway through my career, hanging alongside his work, and I like to think that he's also halfway through his career, although so far it's been a little longer than mine. I was trying to think about what we could talk about that would be interesting for everybody to hear, but also interesting for us in terms of engaging in a conversation about our life in art to share with you all. And so I thought the best thing to do would be to kind of start with sort of our background. Both of us grew up in families of artists, as many of you know. This is the first time we've shown together as father and daughter, but back in 1985, just after my grandfather, Bjorn, passed away, we had a family exhibition, which included 11 family members, the work of 11 family members. And I just want to acknowledge, too, that my aunt and uncle are here tonight. So we have 3 of the 5 Egeli siblings here. We have Mary Lois Eckroos and her husband, my uncle Ray. There's Mary Lois. My dad's younger sister. And his younger brother, B.J. Egeli, is also here. I don't know if any other Egeli snuck in other than our immediate circle, but it's great to have you all here. I'm really happy to have you here. I thought we'd just start off talking a little bit about growing up in a family of artists. And Dad, I think I'll hand it off to you first to go ahead and talk. And I'm sure you could go on for a long, long, long time about what it's like to grow up in a family of artists, but let him share some thoughts with you.
Well, when you grow up in a family of artists, you really are immersed. You can be swallowed by it. And my first memory of having an art lesson was when I was about 5 years old, and we lived in a house on what was then LeBlond Avenue in Cheverly, Maryland, now Chevrolet Avenue. And a road crew was repairing the road, and they had a steamroller there, which absolutely fascinated me. And I looked at it, and so I finally ran and got a piece of paper and started making a drawing of it. And after a few minutes, I was aware that my mother was behind me. And pretty soon she said, "Peter, if you look very carefully, you'll see that the wheel on the other side of the roller is smaller than the wheel that's closer to you." And I looked at it. How could that be? And I looked at it, and she was right. And so I made the drawing to show that. And then, apropos to that, and this is just to give you an idea about how children, at least this child, thought. My dad took me to a boatyard, and he had 2 cars. One was an enormous Lincoln Town sedan that he used to carry his large portraits in, and the other was a little Ford that he ran around the country with. And we got in the little Ford, and we were going somewhere with it. And ahead of us was a railroad overpass. And I looked at it through the window, because you could hold on to the dashboard handle in those days. And I looked at it and I thought, that space is smaller than my thumb. We'll never get through that. What's going to happen? And as we got closer and closer to it, it got bigger and bigger. And poof, we were through it. And I looked behind me, and it got smaller and smaller. And I thought, isn't that wonderful? The road widens to let us through. and then just down the street, just another way of thinking was a good doctor who had a summer home, and it was an old one, and the screen porch was very old, and it had a lot of holes in it, in which he had stuffed balls of cotton. And one day when I was visiting him, I said, Dr. Johnson, why do you put cotton in your screen? He says, oh, keeps the mosquitoes out. And I thought, isn't that nice? There must be something about cotton that mosquitoes don't like. And on it goes. I mean, this was my thinking in those days. So then I started drawing more and more, and then I started making models of things. And I remember one day when I and Cedric and BJ, you were 1 year old at the time, Cedric was 3, and I was 5. And Mother sat us down on the floor in the upstairs bedroom and said, let's make a boat. She had a piece of cardboard, one of those shirt boards. And so she snipped out several little strips on it, and then she snipped out what looked like the side view of a boat, and then she snipped out what looked like the back view of a boat, and then she taped it all together, and she made a form for what the shape of the middle of the boat would be like. Then she bent these little strips around it, and lo and behold, she had Dad's dinghy. And I thought, oh, isn't that great? Maybe I can do that sort of thing too someday. But it went on and on from that. And when we talk about nurture, we took Lisa to see the Ra expedition. She very much wanted to see that. And I'm working away in the studio, and Lisa's out in the field gathering straw of some kind. She comes in with a bundle of straw, and darn if she doesn't start shaping it into the Ra. She tied the bundles together. I still have the center bundle that never did disintegrate. Anyways, come on, tell the rest of your story.
No, well, it's funny. I mean, you can kind of see what we're talking. We're focusing a little bit on kind of what it is about our background that kind of nurtured an interest in art and our direction in art. There is, some people do believe it's genetics, but I think it's a lot more complicated than that. So, you know, the stories you were telling, you used to do this thing when we would be sailing I grew up sailing on the boat that he built, 30-foot gaff rig cutter named Galatea, and we spent 2 weeks every summer sailing around Chesapeake Bay. And we would be out sailing and approaching the Bay Bridge, which we didn't go under it that often, but I remember one of the first times we were approaching it and I was like, oh, Daddy, we are not going to make it underneath that bridge because we're on the boat and we're looking up at the top of the mast and it was way taller than the bottom of the bridge. And I was just terrified. I think I probably even started crying. You know, I was just so, but you know, we made it, and you start to think about things like perception and perspective and, you know, how distances appear, and I think all this sort of goes into looking at the world a particular way. Right? I mean, we did the same thing with making models and constructing them. We would play on the floor of his studio, my brother Stuart and I, and we would carve out the mat board and make boats and then have battles. But it was the same sort of thing where we start to think of objects in space and the dimensions of them. And so it kind of starts to become a part of your worldview and of how you view everything. It's the same thing with color. I started to view color kind of through what I saw that he noticed.
Yeah. I had several thoughts that I was going to say, and then I went so far ahead of myself I lost my original thought. But anyway, one of the things that you learn in drawing and painting is that, I'm going to digress a little bit. I woke up one morning 25 or 30 years ago in one of my reflective moods, and I was listening to the birds outside and watching the water and the boats going up and down the river and the tree out front and how it grew and the way the leaves were related to the twigs, to the branches, to the trunk, to the roots, etc. And I thought to myself, you know, all nature points to the truth, but the truth is not in nature. Truth is independent of perception completely. So we have to have our own way of learning how to look at things. And we look at a color, and we'll say we know that that color is green, and is this mine?
No, that would be really odd if you had it with you.
So, anyways, I got into, more seriously into drawing and painting because I love to make pictures of boats and airplanes and birds and animals. And I would sometimes get up early in the morning and go to a favorite old pear tree on the farm and climb up in it, say 4 o'clock in the morning or early, and wait until the birds started to come. And the birds would just flood that little tree. And they'd be 2 or 3 feet away from me, and I'd be busy sketching and drawing. Well, I was home taught until I was 14 years old. And one of the things about home teaching was that with the Calvert system, every 20 lessons you had to send in all of your work with a cover. And the cover had to be something that you really liked, so a picture of something. So I would make a picture of a bird, I'd make a picture of a muskrat, I'd make a picture of the barn, I'd do all these different things. And at the end of the year, you got a beautiful bound volume of all of your lessons with all of the covers in there. Well, I looked at those from time to time, and I thought, you know, maybe I ought to practice a little more. And if I did practice, I'd get better. And if I got better, who knows, maybe somebody might even buy, or I could even win a prize at the county fair. So anyways, I did finally make a picture of a mallard duck, imagining that I was above it and it was flying over a cornfield, and it did win a prize at the county fair. But you've got some of those things.
Yes, but I'm just enjoying hearing the stories he's telling, as I'm sure you all are. Well, let's talk a little bit about going from growing up in a family of artists to then deciding this is going to be my career. This is what I'm going to do. This is going to be my job. I mean, it's definitely made easier by looking at your parents and seeing that's the most normal thing in the world to do. So all my friends and colleagues that had to convince their parents or fight against their parents even to pursue art as a career, I have great admiration that you were able to persevere through that. But for us, it was the most natural thing in the world to do. It was just a matter of then doing it really, really well. And satisfying both yourself and an entire family of prospective critics. But always general critics, but critics. But so, Dad, talk a little bit about where you went to art school and who were your main influences, your mentors.
Well, I really wanted to have some money. I was tired of being so poor that I'd save my nickels and dimes to get anything. So I took a job with a butcher who had a little grocery store called the R&J Grocery just outside the gate to the Navy base. And one day there was not much activity going on, and so I grabbed a piece of butcher's paper and I started making a drawing of Mr. Jacobson. And it turned out pretty well, and I thought, gee, I didn't know I could do that. So I thought to myself, maybe I should look at this business a little closer. Well, the following year I graduated from Great Mills High School, and I applied to the Corcoran and George Washington University. And I got in, by hook or by crook, but I did. I got in up there, and I was attending drawing classes at the Corcoran, doing charcoal portraits and nude drawings of models. And I have to tell you about my first episode with a nude. Oh, yes. Geneva was her name. She was a sweet lady. And she was in Mr. Edmund Archer's class on figure drawing. And we were all told we were going to have our first nude model that day. So I thought, and she came in and she had a robe on, and there was a stool over there, and so I thought, well, at least I should turn my back while she disrobed. So I looked out the window and I turned around. There was Geneva sitting on the stool, but you couldn't see the stool because Geneva draped over it. So So I began drawing Geneva, and I made quite a large number of drawings of Geneva. But then the following week we had a portrait model, and she was a pretty little girl, and I did a fairly decent charcoal of her, and I took that home. And Mother and Dad jumped on it, and they said, "Oh, this is right, this is right, this is right, but this is wrong, and this is wrong." And so we went on like that for the whole thing. And I was doing reasonably well, but the next spring, I got a letter from Uncle Sam, who said he'd like my service for a while. Well, the Army was going to take me. And then at the last minute, the Army said, "No, we can't get you in this particular branch, but we'll find a place for you." And I thought, gee, I don't really want to go in the Army for that. So Dad was painting the Commandant of the Marine Corps' portrait at the time, General Lemuel Shepard. And he mentioned to the General what my problem was. And the General said, "Well," he says, "I'm entitled to one personal recruit each year. Your son could be my recruit for this year." Okay, that's wonderful. So I joined the Marine Corps, and they said to me when I weighed in, they said, "Have you lost some weight recently?" I said, "No, I've been running all summer." They said, "Oh, that's fine, we'll fatten you up." So I got, after the boot camp, I came out weighing about 30, 40 pounds more than when I went in. But the neat thing about it was that there wasn't anything that I couldn't do that he asked me to do, except for the harassment. The mental harassment was terrible. But the big problem with it was that because I was a Commandant's recruit, I had to go back to battalion headquarters at least once every week, every 2 weeks, to give a report on how I liked Paris Island. So what I could say was, well, I was getting plenty of exercise, and the food was really pretty good. It really was. And but one day I was being carried back to where I was supposed to be stationed by a corpsman, and the junior DI saw me coming, and he started running over toward me. I thought, oh, he wants me out of the range quickly. He didn't stop. He knocked me down. He started pummeling me and beating me and saying, "We know why you're here. Washington sent you to spy on us, didn't they?" And I said, "Sorry, yes, sir. I didn't want to comment." He said, "How'd you know that?" "Well, sir, the drill instructor just told me, sir." And he laughed and he let me up and kicked me on the butt and sent me out to the line again. But very soon after that, I was caught making a drawing of the workings of the M1 rifle in the lectures that we were supposed to have. And the guy whacked me on the back of the head, and then he said, oh, he said, "You do that kind of thing?" He said, "You write home to your daddy and ask him to send you some paper and stuff." So I did, and next thing you know, I had a charcoal paper and pastels. And next thing I knew after that, I was doing portraits of every drill instructor. Your
drawings are still in the manual. Your drawings of the gun and how to take it apart and clean it.
No, they're not there. No. But some of those drawings have worked their way over to the Navy Annex, and some in the Pentagon. I'm trying to think somewhere else. And a lot of my old friends at Marine Barracks 8th and I calling me up and saying, "Look, I've got one of your portraits. Are any of you guys here tonight?" Well, I thought some of you would be, but they're all like me, So, anyways, it was great. From that point on, I thought, well, let's pick out a really good art school. And while I was there, they said, "Well, you made these scores. We could put you at OCS very easily." And I said, "Well, what do I have to do?" And they said, "Well, another 5 years after you finish." I thought, "Oh, no, that's great." So I get transferred to Marine Barracks 8th and I, where I'm a Presidential Guard, a parade ground soldier. But my job was to make training aids for the men in the field, so that they could show them how to make the training aids, so they could do things for their men. Got lots of interesting stories about that, but it'd take too much time to tell. But and lots of laughs on it too. But when among other things, I had to make parade programs for every visiting dignitary, marshal, Zhukov was there, and Winston Churchill was there, and I'm trying to think of all the other big name boys who would come to town from all over the world, and I would have to make a pen drawing of them to put on the parade program. So anyway, so I finally decided on the Maryland Institute of Art, and it was a lucky choice because I got the last of what I consider the really great teachers there. There was they may have more now, but I didn't see them for a while. But then Jacques Maraget, who was one time director of the Louvre Laboratories and the curator of paintings there, was my principal teacher, and he also taught anatomy. Well, since I grew up on a farm and was very familiar with the workings of dead animals, he made me an assistant of his because I could explain the bones and muscles to all the students. And then I was his assistant for about 3 years. And then after that, when I thought, well, I very much want to try to see if I can get the Prix de Rome prize, and they were still offering it when I went in. But by the time I finished up, they weren't doing it anymore. So well, I won the senior concourse, but that was about it. And I went back to, I went on up to the Art Students League to finish up the education that I needed, and then to George Washington to finish up the academics. And from there, it was, I won't say it was a smooth ride to the top, because when I got home, I was painting a lot, but I couldn't sell anything because there was nobody to buy. And I thought, well, if I can get enough money for my car, I can go up to Washington and take it to a gallery that my father dealt with. And I thought, well, how am I going to get the money for the gas to go up there? Because Mother and Dad had then moved up to Washington for a while. They had an apartment there. The farm was left for me and whatever else. And so I thought, I'll go soft crabbing. I know a fellow who will pay $1.25 for crabs. That'll get me 5 gallons of gasoline. So I went crabbing, and it was terrible. I got 2 crabs. Well, I had to walk all the way from there.
And that's ended his art career.
All the way from there to where the guy bought the crabs, which is about 5 miles distant. And by the time I got there, it being so hot, one crab had died. So I go home, and I thought to myself, I have never felt lower in my life. What in the world is going to happen from here? Well, I didn't consciously think it, but I kept thinking, you know, we all live by grace in one form or another. And I went to sleep that night, wondering what was going to happen the next day. And doggone it, the banker's wife didn't call me and said, I hear you have some paintings that you've been doing. So she came down and she looked at what I had. I had made a number of Renaissance copies. She bought one for $25 and another one for $15. And wow. Then I thought, well, now I'll go on up to DC and show what I've got. Well, I didn't even get a chance to do that. The next day, the head of the Navy League called me and said, he needed a portrait. So he said, well, how much do you charge? I said, well, I said, I'm not really in the market yet, but I guess it's got to be $250 because I've got to spend so much time on it. That's fine. When can you start? So I started. Then I did the superintendent's wife's portrait. And next thing you know, everything was going fine. It was fine. Step. And then I met Stu. Things really changed then, and she introduced me to the world. And I went up to Harford County and met her dad, who was mayor of the town. And they showed me around town, and next thing you know, I was doing some portraits there, and they had friends in New Haven, and next thing you know, I was doing portraits up there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's how I got going.
I don't know if my story's all that is interesting as that one.
Oh,
except
my gosh,
that
she went around the world.
Yeah.
Say that.
I went to art school at the American Academy of Art in Chicago, and through going to school there, I ended up getting really interested in commercial art as a way of supporting myself and kind of breaking into the art world. So.
She saw what a hard time I had. That
Well, we all try to learn a little bit from our parents. And plus the realities of the art world change and how to make a living as an artist. It changes. And I think I saw that the best way to support myself as an artist was to kind of learn some different avenues, some different ways to sell my work. So commercial art was a great way to do that. And Chicago was a great place to learn that. So on one of my last days at the American Academy of Art, I ran into one of the guys who had graduated from there a year earlier, and he said, storyboards. Learn how to do storyboards, learn how to work with markers, and you'll be fine. So I was like, oh, great. So I took a class in marker rendering, and that really supported me through my move back to Maryland. I settled in Baltimore.
She told me about 36-hour stints.
Yeah, oh yeah, I would get the job, I was freelancing, and they would say, great, we need it Monday morning, and so I would just, drink Coke and eat Ho-Hos and marker render away all the way through the weekend, and I supported myself that way. I did some waitressing. I think that's sort of required in any art career to have certain skills in the service industry, so yeah, so that kind of got me started, and that allowed me evenings and weekends to try to do portraits, which I really struggled with in terms of, doing anything that met the level of quality that I wanted or expected. But it kind of gave me doing illustration during the day, gave me the freedom to do other work on the evenings and weekends. And I did this routine for a couple of years and saved up a chunk of money. And instead of buying a car or a house, I bought a ticket, a round-the-world plane ticket, and bundled up my pastels and watercolors and took off around the world and for 9 months of travel, and had an amazing time, and kind of confirmed for myself that this was really something I wanted to do for a living. And it wasn't just because I came from a family of artists that I do this. And so since then, I've had a lot more focus, and that kind of helped give me some direction. Like my dad and my grandfather and my aunts and uncles, I like to do portraits on commission, but I also, as you can see by looking around you, am really, painting and capturing nature is a huge part of my work and what I do. I'm really passionate about nature, and I like the balance of painting people and painting places. I don't generally put people in my places, but I find people fascinating to paint. And then when I go in nature, I like to sort of paint nature like I like to experience it, which is all by myself. But I'm really drawn to wild places and to nature. And growing up on the shores of Chesapeake Bay on the St. Mary's River, my parents still live in the same place. We've lived there. They've lived there since I was 2. I grew up also soft crabbing and fishing and just being immersed in nature, and so it's a huge part of my work, and it's been a huge influence on me. And also, obviously, the largest influence has just been visiting his studio and seeing his work and being surrounded with that. It does sort of just really imprint your way of looking at the world. And you have that same passion for nature, and it shows in the paintings that are hanging around here. Some of these are from our travels, and some of these are from close to home. You'll be able to see just all the paintings have descriptions on them, so you can kind of see that. But some of these are from your trip back to Norway, where your father came from, my grandfather.
Really, what she has been saying is streamlining the whole story. It's so multifaceted. I keep saying to myself, someday I'll put all my news together and write a book about it all, because it was truly amazing. And among other things, my father very much wanted to have a boat of his own design, and a big one too. So when he bought the farm, Lee Farm, it came with 125 acres of almost virgin timber, and he soon thereafter bought a home sawmill, a farm sawmill, and he began to mill wood to repair the barns, repair the house, and build the boat. And the boat he had been designing for, I guess, 4 or 5 years before that. And when he finally got around to building it in 1947, it took him 8 years to finish it and to launch it, which he did in 55. And thanks so much for bringing those pictures. Where are you? Yeah, yes, thanks so much. One of Dad's friends brought photographs of the boat launch and boat under construction, et cetera, et cetera. But the whole business of painting is I want to say that it's not a normal business. You can't even think of it as a business. If you do, it reminded me of when I was on the rifle range in the Marine Corps. You were supposed to try to get a score of 300. Well, you'd start out at one range, at the 100-yard range, and if you missed one, you say, oh, I've got to take 2 points off there. And then you say, well, that's 298. And then you go back to the next one, and you missed a couple more. And then you say, oh, no, that's 295, you know. And so on. Finally, you get back to the 600 yards, and you're shooting there, and you think, oh, boy, I have no chance in the world. And then suddenly, you're not 300, but you've only dropped maybe 6 points. So you're okay. So the whole thing about becoming an artist is almost the same way. If you keep track of where you are, you're never really going to get ahead, because you're constantly comparing yourself to somebody else, and you always know that somebody's going to be different from you, and they're going to do things differently than you do it. I had something that I was going to say along that line, now I've skipped it. Back to the truth being nature pointing to the truth. If you look at the way light falls on an object, it only hits the side that's facing towards the object, unless there's something behind it that will reflect the light to it. If I held up my hand like this, you see my chin gets lighter right away. If I don't do that, I'm darker all over. And if you make a painting of something, you can have the object itself within the painting perfectly painted for itself. But if it's in a setting, you have to have the setting completely related to the object.
No, you're
I'm afraid I'm getting too...
No, well, we might be getting to Art 103. I know there's some art students here, and there are also some...
And brothers and sisters that are really good at it.
And some excellent siblings, and I saw Cedric and Jeanette come in as well. And there he is. There's Cedric Egeli.
Yeah.
And Jeanette, I'm not sure where she is. No, Jeanette's here also. So, yeah, so there she is. Great. That's great. Thank you for coming. So, yeah, so I think maybe, we could, if any of you have specific questions about philosophies of, or approaches to actually painting, I know there are a lot of art students here, then feel free to come up afterwards and ask us about them, especially him. But I mean, a lot of what he said really resonates for me, and about just it definitely requires a little bit of perseverance to maintain your focus in art career, and it's definitely not the easiest choice. But I think I'd like to joke that at this point I'm too old to learn how to do anything else. But I think this, having the momentum of this family tradition has really made a huge difference for me. I always feel like I'm really growing, and my work is never where I want it to be, but I delight in kind of where it is now. So I'm always striving to get more out of it, to really just elevate the work that I'm doing. So who knows kind of where it goes from here.
You
Do
know,
you have-
you look at older work and you ask yourself, did I do that? Why did I do it that way? Why did you change it? No. It's a record of the way I did it. It's a record of my growth.
Right, that's true. That's true. Yeah. So I think.
Questions from anybody?
Yeah, I think at this point we'll open it up to questions, just to kind of, do you want to start
So
here?
watercolor, how did you decide to do watercolor?
Oh, let me
Because
tell
I
you about
know
that.
that-
Let me tell you.
Well,
about
he's been doing watercolor for a long time, just beautiful.
One of my jobs on the farm, as the oldest boy, was to make sure that every room in the house had firewood. And so, especially on cold nights. Well, I would go out on a cold night, just after the sun went down, and get the firewood to bring in. And I looked at the western horizon on the mouth of Herring Creek, and it would be red at the bottom, blue at the top, and I thought, how can I ever do that? So I would, as soon as I put all the wood down, I'd run into the house. I was using illustration board in those days. Seabrook, you had a bunch of that board too, didn't you? Yeah, and so I would put a wash on it, and I would put the deepest blue that I had at the top, and if it wasn't deep enough, I'd put a little bit of red in it, alizarin crimson, or even a little bit of black, and I'd wash it down a little ways, and then I would turn it over, and I'd put the red down at the horizon, and let it wash upwards, and then I'd put it together, and when I had it just right, I'd lay it down flat, and it would dry, and then I would draw the trees, the tall timbers on it, and the reflection in the water. And that was the way I started doing watercolor. And then I had another thing. I had a little speedboat, which I just thought was fabulous, and I would listen to Schubert and draw pictures of the speedboat and have it in watercolor and have it coming towards me with most of it out of the water, maybe the color in the water, and I would make it on a long strip, and then I would bend it, and it would look like the 3D. And
Ahead of his time again.
yeah.
That's great. Another question back here?
So you talked about how you started to see perspective and distance and things, how you
Yeah.
started to perceive it really young. Do you know how you started to see the light? Because the light is what's so astonishing in your work, both of you.
See the shadows.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think as much, sometimes it's hard to see the light if you're just focusing on the light in it, but it's the play of the shadow areas with the light, I think, that really, I know for me, is kind of how I see it. And I also learn a lot just by experiencing it and being out in the light and trying to observe as much as I can what it is that makes a particular day or atmosphere feel like it feels, or what are I do a lot of plein air painting, which is just painting outside on location. We used to just call it doing studies on location, as everyone always points out all the time. But now, it's more commonly known as plein air painting.
Yeah. BJ, do you remember the day that Dad took you and me and Cedric into the studio? It was a snowy day, and he put you on the model stand and made a drawing of you. And it was, do you remember that drawing, Cedric? Where he made a little egg shape first, and BJ was facing out, looking out over the snow, and he smeared in charcoal behind it, and then he smeared it under, and then he took his thumb and he drew it out to the cheek, and then he took a bit of off his thumb and put it for where the eye, he put a little bit for the nose, and then he started to fill in, and as he drew, it had been 5 minutes working on it, and he had a beautiful likeness of you. I'll never forget that. And I thought, gosh, if he can do it, maybe I can too. Good luck, but I did approach the idea that day, and it was an eye-opener for me to see how he manipulated the shadow shapes to make the whole shape of the face. And I had another fellow, his teacher used to tell me, my father's teacher was Eugene Weiss at the corporate, would tell me, and I was fortunate enough to get him there that first year I was at the corporate. would tell me, just remember, all the action is in the hat, the space between the shadow and the light. That's where all of it is. Look at you there, Pat. You can't see yourself, but you got the light coming this light on you.
That's what you've done as portrait.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Kirsten?
I don't know if there's an answer specifically for this, but one thing that strikes me about your portraits, both of you, is how in the world you capture someone's soul in their eyes with paint. I can't, for the life of me, figure out how you manage to do that, and particularly with people who've already passed away, and you're working from flat photos.
You have to love people, and you have to be keenly adjusted to expressions when you look at them to make a portrait of them. If you're looking at your post-mortem portrait, you've got to see dozens of photographs, and you can put them all together. And if you put them together in such a way that you get a little bit of every expression that the person is capable of in one likeness, if they're in perfect balance with each other, because we all have this tendency to see subjectively, at least I think we do, to see subjectively, you will see what you're looking for. And if you knew the guy as a real SO so-and-so, you're going to see that in it. But if you knew him as a kindly person or her or whatever, you'll see the expression you look for. I learned that because my mother always made the living room at the farmhouse off limits to the kids during the week. Sundays you could go in there, but the weekdays you couldn't. Well, there was a porch that went around the house from the front to the side to the back room where our classrooms were. And if it was really miserable outside, I would kind of sneak through. And if I sneaked through, there was Mother's portrait hanging. If I was sneaking through on the wrong day, but if I went through on Sunday all dressed up, it was an odd thing. I've thought about it. There's something to the way we see people.
It's true.
Yes.
I don't have a question. I want to expand on the topic. Lisa painted a charcoal of our daughter when she was 10 years old. 10 years later, we lost it in a fire. Lisa had tons of photographs of that portrait and did it again for us. When we got the new one and hung it, it was identical. It was the most precious 10-year-old you ever saw. But we could see the difference. The first one showed a rascal. The second one showed a little angel. I saw the difference, and it was just
I usually try to make it so the parents only see the angel. But it's true, Dad, when I was learning, and I would bring my portraits that I was working on to the studio for critique, and of course, as soon as I brought it in the studio, I burst into tears because it wasn't good enough, and I was just like, oh, I don't know what to do. But every time I would get frustrated with the portrait, or really with any work, anything I was working on, Dad would say, you really need to love it. You really need to love the portrait, the person you're painting. You need to love what you're doing. And, as a teenager, just feeling like, I can't climb this mountain of becoming a great artist. It was hard. I didn't know. I kind of knew what he meant, but I didn't really get it. And honestly, it wasn't until maybe, 10 years after that I started to get it. And I'm still discovering it. But I know it sounds corny to some people, but that love in the painting is the most important ingredient. It's kind of like people who cook. Jackie's mom will make something and say, well, it's got love in it. And it's the same thing, whether it's cooking or painting, or music or any arts. If it has that love in it, then it comes so much easier and it shows in the work. I feel better about it. People who see it connect with whatever it is that is in that piece of art. And that's been one of the most important lessons for me is needing to feel that in order to have the work succeed.
And don't worry about style, it'll happen. Cedric and I both went to the Art Students League, and I remember one day, he wasn't there when I was there at the time, but I remember one day, I was walking back to the school from 5th Avenue, walking down 57th Street, and thinking about what I was doing, and it suddenly came to me the character that I wanted my work to have. And it wasn't a specific image, it was a complete character of the work. That's what I wanted. And it took me quite a few more years to get that character in the work, but it happens. It does happen. It's like Glenn Miller looking for the perfect sound for his orchestra.
Yeah. I think we have time for maybe one more question if anybody has one. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and, yes.
Can you spend a minute talking about how you're inspired by certain scenes? What you see when you're out and looking around, and what goes through your head?
You want to talk about your inspiration?
No, I think the inspiration comes from inside. Inspiration is what it is, inspiration. But it depends on what you're looking for that inspires you. In other words, you may not be looking for something, but it might be close enough that if you take a minute to look at it, you'll say, oh gosh, this will really make a nice picture. This will make a nice page. How will I do it? What paints will I start with? What key will I paint in? And so forth and so on. And once you've worked that out in your mind's eye, I'll give you another example of how things like that have happened for me. Years ago, I was asked to do a painting of the landing of the Ark of Egeli. And the person who commissioned me wanted it because it was, they considered the Ark of Maryland's first freighter, because, or tanker, because she carried 106 tons of beer, beer, and 6 tons of wine. So I had been researching the Ark of Maryland for years, and even gone so far as to learn the exact methods that were used in the 17th century to design a vessel like that. And one evening, I'd gone to bed early and was listening to all the sounds outside, and I dozed off, and I kept hearing a bump, 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 bump sound. What in the world is that? I thought. And I rolled my eyes around, and I looked up underneath my eyelids, and I found that I was looking down the hull of an enormous wooden ship. And the more I looked at it, I thought, gee, this is an early vessel, because I could see the rigging and the trestles, and I went forward and I looked at the head on the bow, and looked down the stem of the vessel to the water underneath, and it was a white sandy bottom, and I came up and went down along the side of the hull, all the time taking notes of the color and the way the light reflected off the sides. And there was a lot of yelling going on, and I looked at the poop, and there, this is all in my daydream. And I saw somebody pointing toward the shore, and another one was waving to a smaller vessel off to one side, and I looked over there, and they were yelling and shouting and pointing toward the shore. And along the shore, when I looked, there was an overturned longboat, and women were running up and down on the shore. And suddenly I realized that what I was looking at was the landing at St. Clement's Island of the Ark of Maryland. This was their first landing, where when the gals had gone ashore to wash the linen, the gentleman's linen, they had overturned the skiff, the dinghy, or whatever, the small boat, and everything was lost. And people were trying to find it because it was very valuable stuff. And so I spent quite a few minutes just there looking at every detail of the whole thing. The sky was filled with birds, there was an island behind it. And the next morning I jumped out of bed, ran to the studio, made a 3x6-inch watercolor drawing of what I had seen, and I made a little makeshift frame around it with a handle on it, so that by holding it from distant distances from your eye, you could make it appear on the wall to be any size you wanted it to be. Now that's pure inspiration, isn't it? I never saw the vessel, but when I put everything together that I had learned and put that with what information I already had about going up on the water and looking at old boats and all of that sort of thing, bingo, you got it. So that to me is inspiration. You can look at a beautiful scene and say, I've got to paint that. But the painting of the Amanda Lewis over there, it's a figment of my imagination. I knew the Amanda Lewis, but only as a powerboat, because I had seen her hull later, but Bob Burgess at Mariners Museum had done a lot of work on her, and I talked with him about her. So, since we used to sail to that shore, Congo River and Louisetta, I knew this thing so well. Stu and I used to go over there often on a Saturday night, or Friday night, sail in, watch the silent lights of the shore. It was wonderful. I hope that answered your question. It all comes from inside you. It's not outside. You can look at something and say, oh, that's beautiful, but you have to think about it before you really become inspired by it. Yeah.
Y'all enjoy portraiture?
I like wall painting. I love
The question was whether we like
portraiture.
portraiture or landscaping.
Yeah, I love the active painting and observing and getting as close to the truth as I possibly can. But yeah, I just like to paint. It doesn't matter whether I paint pastel or watercolor or oil or pencil or pen ink or whatever. It's just expressing itself. Okay.
Okay, well, I think we'll go ahead and draw this to a close, but if anybody, obviously, we're going to be here, so feel free to come up and ask questions. My dad, with my mom and help, put together this great biography of my grandfather. And we have some copies of it here. I don't know how many we have. If we run out, then you can order them online. They're self-published on Blurb. But we have some copies here, and I'm sure if you're nice, that'll be happy to sign them for you as well. But we will have those. They're $50 plus Maryland sales tax, so $53. So, and I guess talk to Jackie to purchase these. If you're interested in purchasing any of the artwork, talk to Sigrid, who runs the gallery. So with that, thank you all so much.